Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legends of Tomorrow. So I got to give this episode mad props for the fact is that it had a very fun side with the fact is, hey, we're in a civil war and we're dealing with zombie Confederate soldiers. But then the other side is like, oh, we have to deal with the fact is we're in the Civil War times and just how serious and depressing and just heartbreaking that can be. It's like the show, I mean, you got to give the show props for the fact is it's like, yo, this is how things would be. And it's like, granted, I mean, it's the CW, so they're not going to go extremely accurate, which, I mean, they didn't shy away from anything, but it's like things didn't go as far as they could have gone, which, you know, thank goodness, because I don't think they could have dedicated an entire episode for it. That's why I'm glad they added the kind of fun, humorous side to it, because it's to balance it out. It's like, oh yeah, you have this deep, dark, dramatic side, and you have like the more light-hearted aspect of it to kind of balance it out. I mean, especially because it's like even Steiner at the end is like, we're in the Civil War, hey, maybe you shouldn't be around. He's like, dude, I was like, I get it, Martin. You're worried about me and everything. You're worried about me, great. I get it. But the fact of the matter is, there's very few points in time I can go to without, you know, having to deal about, you know, not having to worry about racism. Racism is a big part of a lot of history. So it's like, you know, I've been a black man my entire life. So I'm pretty sure I can handle it, you know, and it's just like, but even then it didn't prepare him for what he saw, because part of him, you know, there's a whole situation where Vixen is like wanting to help out, but then he stops her because they see a lady not about to straight up gets flogged for, the fact of the matter is that she messed something up. And it's like, Vixen's like, oh, we have to do something. But, you know, Jackson's like, no, we can't. Because it's like, he's like, I've been doing this time traveling thing for a while. And you never know. It's like, you want to do something, sure. But who's to say there won't be ramifications for doing what you do? Like, in a very bad way, you know. That's one small thing could have the largest ramifications. So it's like, he didn't do anything at first. And then later on, sadly, he ended up getting captured by the dude, just for the sake of the fact is that he held up the guy, like, he bumped into a lady and he grabbed her hand, and it's like, oh, you made eye contact while you were touching her hand and talking to her. It's just like, oh shit. And he's apologizing and everything, and it's like he could have fought back, but things would have just gotten worse. I mean, who's to say he wouldn't have straight up got killed? I was literally halfway expecting Jax to get whipped. I was like, oh crap, and it's like they locked him up. I was like, okay, that's slightly better. I mean, granted, the guy punched him and beat him up a little bit. I was like, oh, thanks. And you saw, you know, Jack's heart kind of break, especially when he looked around and saw all these other different people chained up. And you see Martin feeling it too. He's like, they're like, what's wrong? You know, Ray asked him what's wrong, and he's like, I don't know. Like, I could feel Jax, and he's like, he's Jefferson, he's scared. And that's the first time I've ever felt him with such fear in his heart and so much anger. And it's just like, you know, it's a hard thing to see. Like, he thought he could handle it, but that reality sunk in. It's like, to know something like that is one thing, but to actually see it and experience it firsthand is another. And it's just like, you know, and it took him by surprise because he looked at them and they might have been beaten up a little bit, it might have been beaten down, but they were not broken. They had hope in their eyes, and he saw that, and that inspired him, because it's like, even in their situation, it's like, they want to see us broken. Because he's like, how are you not going crazy? It's like, they want to see us like that. We won't give them the satisfaction. You know, we'll keep our hopes up for a better day, and it's just like, that's very inspiring. I mean, there was that part of my brain that was kind of like, later on, when it's like the zombies kind of overrun the place, and it's like that slave master dude is like fighting off zombies and everything, and then Jack's like, yo, you got to give me a gun so we can help you out and everything. But the guy's like, oh, I'm not going to give any guns, you know, weapons to that help. You really think I'm that stupid? And then a zombie gets him and he's biting him, and then Jax is on the other side of him. He's like, you gotta help me, you gotta help. Jax didn't really do anything, but he didn't really have to, because a second later a zombie came and bit the guy's face. I was like, well, like, legitimately, I'm not going to say I'm broken up about it. I was about to say, like, are we about to go that route where it's like, okay, are we about to change his heart? But it's like, no. It's to show you, like, you know, just how deep, because it could have been easy to be like, cop out and be like, oh no, like, he has a change of heart and they work together. It's like, no, he didn't have a change of heart. To the very end, he was a bigot and just closed-minded and didn't even, you know, it would have increased his chance of survival, but he didn't want to, so he was just so in his own, you know. it's one of those situations. I'm not trying to defend him, but it's a situation of like, hey, that was a time and era. It doesn't justify it in any shape or form. But the fact is, when everyone is like that, well, a lot of people are like that at a time and period, you're not going to change their mind like that, especially him. He was very set in his ways. So I'm like, not that sad that the zombie bit your face off and everything. And most likely your body got burned to bits because, like, Jax threw that down. Like, I was halfway expecting when Jax picked up that lamp that he taps into his, like, firestorms power a little bit, because they can tap into it a little bit, but I don't think I don't know, because I swear they've separately used it to certain extents, haven't they? Maybe they haven't. I was just halfway expecting him to take the flame and like sucking out the like candle lamp and just harness a little bit of that fire and burn him a little bit. I was halfway expecting that, but he just threw the lamp down and everything caught on fire. I guess, they're oil lamps if I am remembering correctly. So maybe the oil fire kind of turned it into a bit of a Molotov cocktail. So even though the fact is Jack's like, I'm just going to watch this burn down for a little bit. So, another big part of this episode is the fact is, dealing with the zombies themselves, which I'll get to Ray and Martin's situation in a little bit. But, Sarah and Nate, the fact is they go to see Grant and everything. Nate ended up bringing up a very interesting fact. What was it? He was like, it was like over 300 people that participated in the union side or something like that were actually men disguised as women or something like that. It was some weird fact like that. I don't remember what it was. And then Sarah just kind of ignored him. He's like, what? You really tell me that's not an interesting fact? And then, once again, like, the fact is that Nate is like, okay, let me do all the talking and everything, just because the time and everything. She's like, all right, because I'm a woman and everything. He's like, well, yeah, it'll be a couple hundred more years before there's equality for women. It's like, oh, really? Just a couple more 100 years, huh? She kind of got you there, Nate. It's like, not like it's 100% equal for women now, but, it kind of put Nate in an interesting situation. He's just like, okay, but still. Ended up talking to Grant and telling him, it's like, okay, there's zombies around. He's like, what the hell is zombies? Okay, they won't know that word for another like 75 years or something. And then Sarah was like, okay, I'm gonna go off, bring you Frank, just wait. You have my word, I'll come back. But if I don't, you can always shoot him. And then Nate's like, she said, ugh. And she comes back after she had chopped off a zombie's head and just left it on the table. Like, legitimately, that's so awesome that it's just like zombies. That's the enemy of the episode, zombies. Which, side note, they never actually tracked down the guy that, the time pirate who brought the freaking virus in the first place to the Civil War age. I mean, I guess they caught him and eventually he probably died from it. So I guess that's that. I mean, they ended up handing out some serums later on, but, it's like they never caught him. They ended up destroying, like, his ship and everything because of, like, well, you can't leave that around because, like, people find it, future technology and whatnot. But I'm wondering, is that going to tie into something else? It was never tied into anything. It's just kind of like a very on its own episode. So it makes me wonder, like, will that be like, oh, the fact is he was stealing that for someone specific? Will we come across his boss in the future? Because we never actually got another side of that conversation of, like, who he was talking to or who he was helped. Because it was like somewhere deep in the future. It was like 2200 something that he was kind of like, oh, yeah, like, there's this whole thing of, what am I saying? Basically, so the fact is they mentioned some far in the distance. Like, now that I think about it, we haven't been to the future yet that I know of. I mean, who's to say where they went exactly in that 6-month period between season 1's finale and season 2's premiere? So it's like they could have gone to the future in that. But so far we've been going heavily into the past. I do hope we get some future episodes this season. We got like we got a couple last season, so I'm sure we'll probably get a couple this season as well. But that was I just love how they ended up resolving the situation to it. It's like Nate got all steeled up and then exploded the zombies. And I love that Sarah's like, oh, you're so good. He's like, I'm covered in zombie guts. And she's like, oh, she touched him, just like, ugh. And he's just like, I think I'm gonna vomit. So yeah, I'm glad he was able to steel up, because it does seem like he's still kind of working out the kinks of using it. It's still not 100% foolproof. And then probably one of the funniest aspects of this episode is Ray and Sign's side of it, because they're dealing with a zombified Mick. Because even Mick was like, please, haircut, I'm asking you, please help me. I don't want to become a zombie. Which I love the fact is that Stein has an irrational fear of zombies. they're like, oh, are they? He's like, don't even say the word. I know they're a myth, but I have an irrational fear of zombies. Getting all antsy like that. It's like, really? It's like you're a very logical person, yet why do zombies fear you, like scare you so much? We never actually got an answer to that as to why. Is it like something he saw as a child or something? Why is it that zombies are the thing that creep you out? You've experienced so much in your life, especially now that you're, a superhero and everything. You definitely experienced a lot then, but it's zombies that freak you out. You've come across monsters, and zombies are what creep you out. Okay. I even love that point later on in the episode when it's like, oh, Ray got knocked out. He's like, oh, Dr. Palmer, oh, please don't be dead. But then he's like, but if you are, please stay dead. It's like, oh, come on, Stein, because he's so terrified. He doesn't want to help it at all. He's just kind of like, or he's like, okay, what we have to do is go in there, give him another shot. He should be incapacitated. He's like, I'm not about to go back in there. Okay, you can go back in here. I'm going to stay right here. He's like, okay, if I go in there and get bit, I might turn into a zombie too. And then you have 2 zombies on your head. And that really made Stein. So he's like, oh my, he didn't think about that. But luckily they were able to turn Mick back into, a human. Like I said, it played, the zombie aspect of it played a much more like a fun side of the episode, especially when it came to Stein and Ray. So that was kind of interesting seeing Mick as a zombie. So that was pretty cool. And then you also had the fact that, like, because it's something I don't think I brought it up last episode, but it's like, maybe I didn't, but I don't think I did. But it's like, what is Ray going to do? Like, he doesn't have his suit. It was kind of a one-time technology thing. It's like everything was put into that one suit. There were no copies of it. So what is he going to do? Like, part of me was like, because part of me was thinking like, oh, couldn't he just rebuild it? But it's like, there was a lot of stuff in there, probably proprietary technology that he doesn't have access to anymore. Because I mean, he's not connected to Palmer Tech anymore. I mean, who knows? Maybe he could go back to present day and do that. I forgot. Do people in Star City? No one in Star City knows that he's actually still alive because everyone thinks he died in the explosion. I forgot about that. But he could always go back in and sneak into Palmer Tech, get some more stuff. I was like wondering, like, what was he going to do? But then you have Mick at the end of the episode basically trying to cheer him up, be like, you're an outsider. It's a good thing to be an outsider. I've always been an outsider. You get to do whatever you want. You get to tell people to shove it. And then he was like, you know what? I'm looking for a new partner anyway. It's like, Smart's going and everything. And pulls out Captain Cold's gun. I'm like, wait, what? And he gives it to Mick. He gives it to Ray. I'm like, dude, that's so awesome. Does that mean technically he's going to become the new Captain Cold? Or is it just going to be like, he's still Ray, he's still Adam, but he's using Captain Cold's freeze gun, which is like, that's so sick, dude. It's going to be interesting to see that come. Like, because I love that dynamic. I love that those two became friends. So I'm very interested to see what happens when you see them kind of heavily partnering up. I guess that was kind of the whole point. They were setting Ray and Mick up. So, when Snart died, he had someone. Like, he's there for the entire team, but I feel like out of anyone, he's closest with Ray. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that, goes forward. I'm just so curious about that. And also another side note in this episode is kind of, basically, you had Sarah getting advice from Grant, basically being like, "Hey, I heard you're the captain," and which kudos to him not saying it. He could have easily made some sexist comment about, "Oh, you being the captain and everything." Oh, peace off, that's a wrap. I mean, let's not forget the fact is you had Rex being. It's like, oh, Sarah's about to, like there was multiple. Well, I forgot at that time they didn't have anyone as captain. Rex assumed it was Martin because he was the oldest person. So it's like, oh, you're older and wiser. Which now I think about it, it's like, why would you think that? You're the young buck of your team, but I guess it's being our man and everything that makes things different. But it's like any person part of that team could have easily been the captain. But nevertheless, just going off. But the fact of the matter is, because she was hesitant to bring anyone else into the fold. She didn't want Jax to go off on his own because it's like, hey, Mick just got bit, and she's like, I'm not about, she didn't. At that point, it's kind of one of those situations where she kind of doubted her own belief in everything. But Grant was like, there's a lot of captains that came before me. I mean, a lot of people leading generals that came before me and everything. But the reason why I'm successful is because I believe in my men. I believe in what we're fighting for. I believe in what we're doing. And it's like, do you believe in your men? Do you believe in what you're doing? And so that's kind of the question. And I think Sarah does. So I think that's going to be something we're going to see her kind of, because that's the whole point of her being the leader, because out of anyone, she is the most concise. I mean, I guess you could argue it's like her training as a member of the League of Assassins kind of made that, come true. Side note, I ended up kind of spoiling myself just because I was looking through Google Images and there's something connected to the League of Assassins that's supposed to be popping up on Arrow. It's something that was kind of brought up in Legends last season. I won't go into too many specifics, but I'm sure, leaving it as vague as that, I'm sure you can kind of be like, oh, that might be what I'm talking about. I'm curious to see where that appears in Arrow and will that have any ties to Legends or not. And speaking of that, and because I was talking about the future earlier, I almost forgot about it. We got a little bit more of hearing what it was Barry was talking about. The fact is, Barry from like 2056, basically there's a war coming. Now, in the back of my mind, when I hear war, legitimately in the back of my head, I was thinking like from a war like what was going on in Flashpoint, maybe. I mean, it can't be that type of war because it's like, well, for one, Wonder Woman and Aquaman and Wonder Woman could exist, but it's kind of like with the whole Justice League movie, there's no chance of that happening on TV because that's like too much to set up. But still, it's like, what kind of war is coming? Is it connected to the Legion of Doom? I hope it's connected to the Legion of Doom. It's most likely connected to the Legion of Doom, so just overall, I'm very curious what that means. I mean, I'm sure even then we still didn't get them. Probably as things progress, we get to hear a little bit more and more about the message. I'm very curious of how long is Jax and Stein going to keep that a secret from everybody? Because even Stein's kind of slipping up. He's like, oh, Sarah. She's like, really? Hey, you just call me Sarah. What's up with that? She's like, normally it's like Mrs. Lance here, Mrs. Lance that. So I don't know. Like, it's probably going to get harder and harder to keep. I mean, who's to say someone else won't stumble across it? Especially because, because it's an episode Ray was kind of sacked, put on the sidelines. Mainly because, Sarah's like, well, it's in that situation of like, is Ray useless without his suit? Which is like I brought up last episode, he doesn't need a suit. He can kick some serious ass. He might not be as well trained as Sarah, but that kind of puts her in an advantage. It's like he has his skills. Even Stein is like, oh, he has Jax so they can become Firestorm. Even Mick has his heat gun, plus the fact is he's kind of a rough and tumble guy. But it's like, so is Ray, but I guess it's like, he's kind of the smart dude, so it's like, it seems like without his suit, he's nothing. But I think this is really going, now that he's got the gun, I think that's really going to kick up the fact that it's like, yo, he can handle himself, kind of. Because like last episode, in my opinion, really showed the fact is that he can handle himself even without his suit. The problem is he just never believed in himself enough. And I think that's what, a big part of the season is going to be him learning to, have faith in himself and his skills. So, but overall, like I said, a very good episode. I mean, it's like I said, they did a good job of balancing like the more fun, zombie side of things with kind of like the more darker kind of historical aspects of this episode, And that's not an easy thing to do, I'm sure. That's like I said, that's definitely why they had to do the zombie storyline too, because they could not make this entire episode that, because it's like it's a superhero show, and it's like that's that's kind of the downside of time travel. History is not pretty. It's very actually it's very dark and depressing in some regards. So it's like like once again, like I said, give them props for the fact is they didn't shy away from that. So they could have easily like, oh, but it's like it's part of the story they wanted to tell. It is part of history, of history that's very heavily frowned upon, but it's still history nevertheless, because history is there to teach us never to make those mistakes again. So, there, along with the bad things that happened in history came good things. Because of that, a lot of good stuff happened from it. And a lot of, people learned to be like, oh, not to be closed-minded like that, to not let something like that happen again. So, I mean, that's just how I'm interpreting it. So, but that's about it. That's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.